You know, people are like that about ads sometimes. The advertiser's going, wah, wah, wah. And the listener's going, I can't wait till this is over. You know, yeah, your store hours, yeah, your street address, yeah. Fair, fast, friendly, yeah, you bet. Here's 35 cents, call someone that cares. Broca's area is what drives you nuts when you hear a dripping faucet late at night. Drip, 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 drip. You see, it's the predictability of that drip that makes Broca just go, I've got to make that go away. It's also Broca, however, that causes you to stand and tap your foot and wiggle your hips and do like this behind the wheel of your car at the intersection when you're listening to your favorite song, because Broca, when he is surprised, takes delight. Surprising Broca is the key to successful advertising. To say something other than what the listener thought you were going to say, or to say it differently than they thought you were going to say it. In music, listen to a hit song, any hit song, I promise you, either in the melody or in the rhythm or in the lyrics, they are surprising Broca. They're doing something other than what Broca's area of the brain had anticipated. When you hear a song that seems trite and repetitive and redundant and just absolutely tedious, it's because it's predictable. Now, I want to ask you something. We're trying to get to the prefrontal cortex, right behind the forehead, the seat of planning, emotion, and judgment. What is the furthest part of the brain from the prefrontal cortex? Vision. Vision. Now, wait a minute. What is the closest part on this map of the brain to the prefrontal cortex if we must cross the motor association cortex? It's Broca's area, right? Broca's area anticipates the predictable, it generates action words, and it describes actions. Now, you are awakened by the smell of breakfast. Slipping on your clothes, you step out onto the deck of the ship just as the sun rises over the ocean. You never knew the sky could hold so many colors, or that breakfast could taste so good, or that you could feel so alive. Sailing with all your friends to a place you've never been. You're having the time of your lives. You're glad you called that number. What was it again? Oh, yes, 1-800-BLUE-SKY. You'll never be able to look at a blue sky again without remembering this trip and smiling. Unfortunately, there's no such company. I bet you kind of wish there was, though, don't you? 1-800-BLUE-SKY. Now, we planted a recall cue, which we'll tell you more about later, and we took you to a place you've never been. You went there in your mind. That is a 30-second ad that I can assure you, were there a company called 1-800-BLUE-SKY, would get a lot of calls from people saying, yeah, I want to go on that trip. And here's what I want for breakfast. And make sure I'm awake when the sun rises over the ocean. Because nobody does anything that they have not first imagined in their mind. The goal of advertising is to get the customer to imagine doing the thing you want them to do. Now, what are the keys? The customer must see himself watching the sunrise, sailing with friends, calling that number. It all happens in the brain. Let's go. The visual association area is that part of the brain where visual memory is stored. It's located at the back of your skull, just above your spine. The area of the brain surrounding your ear, the auditory association area, is where words, music, and sounds are stored. The prefrontal cortex, just behind your forehead, is the seat of planning, emotion, and judgment. The prefrontal cortex is what must be reached if we have any hope of getting the customer to say yes. Now, mental imagery, imagining something in your mind, imagining the sun rising over the ocean, that would happen in a computer in RAM. Active, currently going on right now. These other things we've been describing are like the hard drive. It's long-term storage that can be recalled at a later date. But RAM, what you're consciously, currently, actively thinking, happens in what's known as working memory. Working memory has three parts. The first of those is the visuospatial sketchpad. The visuospatial sketchpad is that movie screen in your brain where you see visual things. You can imagine the sun rising over the ocean on the visuospatial sketchpad. Now, the articulatory loop, or the phonological loop, or what I call echoic memory, is another function of working memory. And the central executive is the third function of working memory. That's the part that makes the decision to decide what to do right now, what action to take. Now, where this really gets fascinating is that common sense would tell us that the visuospatial sketchpad would be at the back of the skull, part of the visual association area. Common sense would also tell us the articulatory loop would be part of the auditory association area around the ear. Common sense would likewise tell us that the central executive would be found in the prefrontal cortex, the seat of planning, emotion, and judgment right behind the forehead. But common sense would be wrong. All three of those are located in what's called the dorsolateral prefrontal association area. Everybody say dorsolateral. Prefrontal association area. Now, where do you think that is? Well, the dorsolateral prefrontal association area is a bridge that crosses the motor association cortex, the action part of the brain. When you see something in your mind on your visuospatial sketchpad, you're seeing it in a part of your brain connected not to your eyes, but to your ears. The part of the brain you're using is connected directly to the auditory cortex through Broca's area. And it crosses the motor association cortex, the action part of the brain, and touches the prefrontal cortex. The DLPFC, dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, is connected to the ear. And that's where you see things in your mind, even when you're imagining things wordlessly, even when you're imagining visual things. This section was called the side door into the brain for one reason. The ear is the key to influencing the human creature. Words, when spoken well or artfully written, cause your customer to see things in his mind. Now, this is why your choice of words is singularly vital to the success of your ads. It's your choice of words. Other decisions such as font, colors, illustrations, and style in an ad, I'm not saying they're unimportant. I'm saying they are merely supportive. You can have the most classy, elegant, beautiful, well-illustrated ads in the world, but if they don't say something that matters to your customer, the ad isn't going to work, no matter how artfully executed. Yes, it's the words that count, even when you advertise in print. Now, here's something really fascinating. When you are reading silently, the words on the page have no meaning. The printed word has no meaning to the human creature until the printed word has been translated into the spoken word in the mind. Until you hear the word in your mind, it has no meaning. Which is why when you're laying in bed so often, reading, and you come to the realization that you're half asleep and you've been scanning the same paragraph for 20 minutes, and you have absolutely no idea what it says. It's because your eyes are doing their job. They're seeing the words, but the words are not being translated into the sound of those words in your mind. That part of your brain is already asleep, and your eyes are still doing their job. Now, remember this. The written language was created only to represent the spoken language. Even when you're advertising in print, you must think of how these words sound together. The sound of the sentence, the sound of the words. You very often will choose the word to use based upon how it sounds. Have you ever noticed how the word mediocre simply means average? But anytime you hear the word mediocre, it communicates disappointment, does it not? Now, technically, mediocre simply means average. But it doesn't mean that here, does it? Mediocre is a bad word. The sound of the word the associations that we have to that word are just as important as the technical, accurate definition of the word. Words are the most powerful force there has ever been. The neurologists have known it for 125 years. Wernicke discovered and named Wernicke's area of the brain where nouns are generated in 1868 during the Civil War. Broca, 1874, over a century and a quarter ago. I think it's time that advertising professionals learn about these parts of the brain, what they do, and how to influence them to get our customer to do what we want him to do. And that's all for this time.